Welcome to Judaism Demystified, a podcast for the perplexed. Join us as we explore some of the most fascinating Jewish and Torah-related topics with our esteemed guests. By tackling some of the biggest questions you likely won't find addressed elsewhere, we aim to shed light on important issues and inspire a return to the fundamentals. Enjoy the show. Thank you for joining the Judaism Demystified podcast once again. Dr. Erica Brown, thank you for joining us. But if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself for those who missed the first episode.
Okay. Well, first of all, it is such a delight to talk to the two of you. I mean, I really I love what you do, and I mean, I like Judaism mystified because I think it's just more interesting that way. But I'm
Mhm.
happy to mystify to the extent that we can. I'm a wife and a mother and a safti and a grandmother, and I work as the vice provost at Yeshiva University of Values and Leadership, and I also direct the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs Herenstein Center. Rabbi Sachs was a very beloved teacher of mine and someone who really was a role model for me and in really in thinking about leadership and platforms of influence and reading and writing and I write a few books here and now, here and
Quite a
again.
few, quite a few.
So first of all, Rabbi Sachs means the world to us. I mean, he's the reason probably why we started this podcast to begin with. You're definitely an extension of his, and we're so honored to have you on again.
I love hearing that. It's very warming. I just actually took a group of about 28 Yeshiva University students to London to really walk in the footsteps of Rabbi Sachs. And
Hmm.
they met Lady Elaine and they met his daughter Gila and they met students of his and people who work with. And then we went to the Kever, which was a first for me because he died and was buried during COVID. So that was a very,
Wow.
I think you really understand the impact that a teacher has on your life when the teacher is no longer there, right? It's a whole piece of Gemara about what
Yep.
disappeared when a particular scholar disappeared, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about the rabbinic voice that he occupied that really we don't have right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's definitely part of the discussion. So let's start with the first question, which is in your preface to your new book, The Torah of Leadership, which is phenomenal. You mentioned how leadership has always been on the forefront of your mind since your very first published book, Inspired Jewish Leadership in 2008. Why has Jewish leadership always been at the forefront of your thoughts? And why, in your estimation, has it become more relevant over the past 20 years, even more specifically since October 7th, than ever before in the Jewish community?
Okay, so great question, multi-part question. Barbara Kellerman, who is an instructor of leadership at Harvard's Kennedy School, and has written some excellent books about leadership, has an article where she says sort of the discipline of leadership is probably about 40 years old, right? So I don't know if the first leadership book appeared in an airport bookstore 40 years ago, but in other words, these ideas of business guidance, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that no matter how successful a company is, so much can be traced, or an institution is so much is traced to the leader, right? It's like the leader sets the tone, the intellectual tone, the spiritual tone, the emotional tone for an institution and or for a movement. And I found that we were talking a lot about leadership outside the Jewish community, and actually in the Christian market, there's a whole Christian market around leadership and thousands of books. If you put in Amazon Christian leadership, there's going to be probably something like 15 to 20,000 books will fit in that category. And at the time when I first started teaching leadership and working on leadership, I live in a suburb of Washington, D.C., and I work with a lot of people who have, high-powered jobs and government and journalists. And what I discovered is that we really hadn't leaned in to leadership as a discipline that also combined with and for me, it's natural and organic to the Torah because we care about succession. You have something beautiful, you care about the Masorah, you care about continuity. So, who are you going to hand that off to? Who will nurture it and treasure it and grow it and improve it? And so that I think I would say that the discipline was important in in American organizational structures. And as it became more significant, the question is, how does this jive with Jewish organizational life? And Jewish organizational life is a huge part of American life, much more so than, for example, in Israel and in many places in Europe. As we have organizational structures that deal with kindness and social services and education. Um, and how do you run those well?
Mm,
And how do you raise money for them?
all right. Excellent points.
So, why in the last 20 years do you feel that this problem has only staggered?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on. Number one, there are huge issues in the world that are accelerated, and said since 2008, anti-Semitism has become a much larger concern, and security of the Jews in general. um, Fundraising and the influence of philanthropists on Jewish structures. So, what we call legacy or well-established organizations like federations and other organizations are having less influence, and families with significant wealth are having more influence in shaping the Jewish future. And I think probably the 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 big breakthrough on that was when a number of large philanthropists got together and they created Birthright, right? They weren't really interested, and they didn't have to be interested in what legacy institutions cared about because they had the money to say, let's create an amazing silver bullet. And I think that was the beginning of now a very different philanthropic way of organizing the Jewish community. And it squeezed out a lot of Jewish communal professionals, and it also put an infusion of cash in many things that we care a lot about. So I think that's been significant. I think we have rabbis who are very immersed in halakha, depending on the denomination, or very immersed in politics. And then there's just like this voice of courage, this prophetic voice of courage that I certainly associate always with Rabbi Sachs. Where is it? When you're thinking, I'm going through something and I just don't know who to turn to. So I'm turning to an op-ed in a newspaper, right? I'm turning to journalists. I'm turning to comedians, right? I mean, when you think about how much influence comedians have
Yeah.
now, if you look on the New York Times website, they'll put like late night comedy is like a category, right? So like, what did the comedians say last night? So you've got these pundits and politicians and comedians, and then you say, where are the faith leaders who are really in some way need to influence the culture, need to set direction, need to also be the moral voice of no on things. And I think that they're largely absent right now. And I think that's very painful. I also think consumerism, technology, these are factors that have really shifted the way that we communicate with each other, the way that people often had communal experiences, which now are singular experiences, right? I don't know about you guys. When I was younger, you went to a concert or you got one album and everybody listened to it at the same time and we all had the same songs. And now, could you have imagined that all of your music would be here and it would be only your music? I would have the playlist, right? As opposed to here's the song list of our childhoods, here's my playlist. So things which influence culture became much more individualistic. And that affects leadership too. And
Excellent.
wait, I want to say one more thing. I'm
Sure.
sorry. I'm just on a roll and I'm excited. Um, I think we have become, because of social media has enabled this and consumerism has enabled this, we have become consumers rather than stakeholders of Jewish organizational life. I don't like this school. I'm going to take my kid out. I'm going to complain, and and I have other options, and I'm actually going to post this on Facebook. And you have a lot of really good people who have said to me, I would never become a rabbi right now. I would never run a school right now. I don't want to be president of a synagogue, JCC, fill in the blank. I wouldn't do that because I care about my self-worth and my dignity and my family. And I think unless we have a whole other category of fellowship, we're going to see bad leaders fill in the vacuum. There's always space for them. So that's a worry for me. It's a worry.
That's a huge worry. That's a huge worry. Bensi, you want to take
Yeah,
that?
you mentioned the term a prophetic voice. That is such an appropriate term because like that really, like when you said that, that's really what we're missing right now. We're missing the prophetic voice. We're,
Yeah.
we're missing that, and it's and I feel
And there are
like
people who don't even know that they can have that in a leader.
yes, it's become it's something you read about. It's something,
Right. It's
completely
mythology.
mythology. Yeah,
Right.
we don't encompass it anymore or try to bring it out anymore.
I
We,
read
we
things that Rabbi Norman Lamb, who was my teacher as an undergraduate at Yeshiva University at Stern College, I read essays that he wrote in the 60s, and I think to myself, that's exactly right. That's exactly what needs to be said. And so, although the covering maybe have been relevant to his period of time, but he had a gift for articulation, and he could help you understand, how should I think about this, right? How should I think about artificial intelligence? Well, if a rabbi doesn't tell me, then I'm just gonna, read what it says in the Atlantic or the New Yorker or wherever I get my news from, right? I'm gonna read that. And I'm not gonna say these are the issues of the day. And we need rabbis who are going to take. You know what? I don't want to limit it to rabbis. I'm going to say educators, because I think thank God in the past 20 years there are more women in the field who are also thinking and producing and writing. And I'm excited to see. I mean, I see all these wonderful young men and women at Yeshiva University who will rise to this. I believe they'll rise to it.
and that is why this podcast is so important that we're doing with you, because what we're trying to do is to promote your book, The Torah of Leadership, which you address a lot of these things in the book, and we want to dive into the book and hopefully encourage people to go out and buy it and read it. So, in your introduction, you discuss leadership as the central theme of the Torah. In your words, we need not read leadership into the Torah as a forced theme or a modern imposition on a sacred text. We read it out of the Torah on every page. Yet it seems we have lost touch with this central aspect of the Torah's challenge to us. Can you discuss the centrality of leadership in the text of the Torah, why we have lost this ability to see it in the text, and conversely, the correct approach to the text to help remedy the problem?
Yeah. Wow, what a question. So, first of all, in traditional learning, we read line by line and often word by word, right? So, in a close reading, we're reading very, very slowly. When you're reading leadership, you're reading it on a very grand narrative scale. So, for example, I might look at a story of Avraham Avinu, of Abraham, and I hyper focus on a detail in chapter 14 or chapter 12 or chapter 20. And what I'm not seeing perhaps is, gee, his father set out on this journey, didn't finish it. Part of leadership is, seeing a vision, is moving a family, is creating a nation, and then there's the land, right? And he has to become a nation. So the nation is land and people. So then you say, oh, well, how is he dealing with the challenges of nationhood? Well, when it comes to land, he's building well, he's digging wells, and he's making covenants, and he's amassing cattle, and he's fighting wars. And it was like he's doing the acts of statesmen. And yet, when it comes to building a family, building a nation, which begins with a family, that's not he's struggling with that, right? So, in every call to leadership, there are things that come naturally to us, the things that give us pleasure and that we're good at, and there are things that are this persistent challenge. You're always going to have this challenge. And you look at the Avram narrative, and you say, Avram really across these, 12 to 25, chapters 12 to 25, like what did he do to just fabricate, like to fashion a nation we had to overcome this fertility challenge in a very profound way. Every solution was actually not a solution. And even once he finds the solution, he has Yishmael, and then he has Yitzchak, and then he has to banish Yishmael, and then he almost sacrifices Yitzchak, and we're back at zero, right? And yet, before he dies, he makes sure that Yitzchak has a wife. So Yitzchak is married and has a wife, so that Yitzchak will continue. And who are we if not those who say, I need to continue and have a successor, whether that's in my own family and religion. And I think we've stopped asking, will I have Jewish children? And we start asking, will I have Jewish grandchildren? Certainly Rabbi Sachs asked that often. Will we have Jewish grandchildren? And it was, do we see a continuous, and how so much of that is the leader? It's the king, it's the prophet, it's the shofet, it's the chief, right? It's the military leader, it's the and these are figures all over the Torah. And not only that, but we have the opposite story. For every leadership paradigm of success, we have the corruption of power. So when it comes to Kohanim, we have we have bad Kohanim, right? Eli's sons and Shmuel, bad Kohanim. We have a Navi Sheker. We have a bad prophet. We have kings that are terrible kings, right? All of the books of Chronicles 1 and 2, all about the bad things that kings do. We have Shoftim who are good and Shoftim who are bad. So I think the Torah is very accurate um, about the losses and wins that come with leaders. But if you don't have leaders, we're done, right? So the project is over. The enterprise is over. And I think that's true. That's true in modern politics. We're right now in a very I don't know. It's such a radical transitional time politically in America, in Israel. I mean, the protests on the streets. People are trying to figure out who's a good leader. Is it a strongman view of leadership? Is it a more collaborative view of leadership? And then you say, like, turn to the Torah. It's there. You're gonna find it.
I feel like we've been conditioned, not that these things are necessarily wrong, but we've conditioned to, in a sense, uh, we look at the Torah and then we, like you said, like, primarily for, drawing out the halacha, or yeah, meaning we're coming with a set of we're conditioned in a way where we're trying to take things out of the text that are very specific towards
Yeah.
specific religious goals, or whatever it is, and those are correct in itself.
Like, how am I going to be a more spiritual person today? So I'm
Yeah,
going to
but we're
learn
not looking
something
at
and
it with
read
open
something.
eyes anymore, to really let the text speak to us, and to really, get the more deeper and existential messages that the Torah is trying to give us.
Well, I think we can have the existential messages, Bensi. I think the issue is the large visionary pictures of
Mhm.
what it means to be a nation, right? What it means to be a nation. So, you have a small family, but then you get to Book of Shemot, you get to Exodus, and you become not, you turn from a small family to a very, very big nation that has a very, very big challenge. And then you have to have law, and then, you have leaders. And before Moses dies, he's going to put Yoshua in place, right? It was, and that's what we expect. We expect, if you're really good at your job, make sure that the next person will be equally good, if not better. Jim Collins in Good to Great calls it level 5 leadership, right? It was, you're really ambitious and driven, but you're also very humble, right? It was, this is, I'm doing this for the sake of something greater than myself, not for myself.
I think also the way we're trained to read the text is that we're supposed to kind of, especially from as yeshiva students,
Right.
this reverence you have for the avot and for all of our leaders is that like we're not supposed to focus on the mistakes, right? We're not
Right.
supposed to we see them, we're almost creating like a superhuman quality where the text is telling like screaming at us not to do that, right? Like in terms of like they make mistakes,
Well, yeah, so if I could just, Benji, just maybe soften that a little bit.
please.
I think that these were extraordinary, extraordinary human beings. And the Torah also includes the points of maturation and challenge that they have, right? So that they can actually feel like they can speak to me. It was, if Yosef is going to deal with some of his, maybe we'll call, whether it's confidence issues or relationship within the family, he's going to have to manage those things. Moshe is going to have to manage his public speaking issues, right? Everyone's going to have to manage. And then you say, wow, look who Yosef became. Oh my gosh, look who Moshe became. He can't speak, and now Az Yashir Moshe, and now he says this beautiful song, and he gives this farewell address, and and Aseret HaDibrot. Everything he does is with a dibor, right? With the strength of his speech. Shalach et ami, let my people go. And then you say, if you can lean into your greatest challenges, look who you can become. And I think you have to be extraordinary to do that, really.
Right. The Torah is taking us on their journey of their process of maturation and a process of becoming the extraordinary people that they became. Instead of just putting them out there as already, a ready-made product, the Torah is showing you the steps taken towards becoming as great as they did.
Yeah.
To
You know, it's
let us draw from that and improve ourselves and get
so
ourselves to
we
that
don't we're
maturation.
so used to this. We're so used to this, Betsy, like that we take it for granted. But every once in a while, I have the tremendous the privilege of teaching someone in the process of conversion. And especially someone who comes from a Catholic tradition will say to me, what was appealing to me about the Torah was this, it wasn't a collection of saints. I could see myself. I saw myself and my own journey and their journey. I mean, it's just such a profound thing. And we take it for granted that the Torah says, well, here's King David, and here's King David's fall. How should we treat the fall? Here's King Solomon. We're not hiding. We're not hiding.
Yeah,
Almost, right? We're not hiding all the wives and all the horses and all the and God's not hiding. And God says, you will be called to account for that. And and that itself is pretty remarkable, because you might say, we don't want to hide, let's put these things,
right.
in the back pages so no one sees them. We didn't do that.
Very true. Very true. So, where have we gone wrong? How do we get back to like we've obviously lost touch with this in the modern day. So, how do we kind of, bring people back to this kind of careful study of the Torah?
I mean, I think people study the Torah very carefully. I'm actually always overwhelmed by the kind of care, um, again, we take for granted. But when I peek into a Beit Midrash on campus, and you see people sitting like, I've been on another college campus. I've worked on other college campuses. And there's people sort of sitting on the quad and having a great time, and then you see students sitting in a Beit Midrash and picking apart every word because every word matters. For me, part of it is saying
Step
step
back.
away and see the
Whole picture.
larger, right. And it's hard to do that if you don't see books, right? If you see lines but not books, and books in relation to other books, or for that matter, so much of Gemara is not only a discussion of halacha and Agadah, it's also Maaseh Shahaya. What did this rabbi do? What did that rabbi do? Like, I'm gonna follow. I'm even gonna lie under the bed, right? And I was like, I need to figure out who should I be in the world. So I think that it's not only a biblical strain. I think it's very, very much a rabbinic strain. Is what do we expect of greatness? And how do we cultivate greatness? And I don't think that I think there are a lot of great leaders, but I do think that this cultural trend of beating up on people is and it's really it's impossible. It's just so hard to manage. I'm just going to be honest with you. I have in my personal email and in my professional email, I have two folders. You ready for my folders? I have a lot of folders, but two folders. One is nice emails for a hard day, and one is terrible, mean emails. And you know what? You say, like, why would you save the mean ones? Because sometimes I have to actually, without ascribing them to anyone, I have to hold up a mirror to what people say. Like they have to see, like, look back on this. Would you want to get this email? Huh? Here's this rabbi. This rabbi has brisked your kid, bar mitzvahed your kid, married your kid, right? This rabbi was here when your parents were sick and they passed away, and now you're upset about something, and you write with this degree of fury and disrespect, and you send it out in the middle of the night. Like, hello. And you know what? What's interesting is when you bring this to people's attention, like, it's not me, it's that guy, right? And I was like, I would never do that. In fact, I wanted to share with you. I gave I've spoken about this before, but I gave an assignment in one of my Wexner classes to an adult group many years ago, and I said, we were talking about leadership. I said, listen, for homework, in addition to whatever I give to read, I want you to write your rabbi. I want you to just write your rabbi an email, like preferably a thank you note on like an actual piece of paper. But okay, send an email. So that I meet them 2 weeks later. I said, well, how did that go? Not everyone did the homework. I know it's a shock. But one of them said to me, I need to tell you something. I went home and I wrote this email and I wrote about the significance and the influence of this rabbi in my life. And I got an instant reply. And the rabbi who I sent it to, my rabbi, said he was crying when he read my email. And he said, Erica, I am embarrassed that I didn't think to do this on my own. How is it that this person has had a foundational impact on my family for decades, and it would not dawn on me to sit down and take 5 minutes and say that? And by the way, teachers are under siege. We don't pay them a lot, and what we pay them, what we could give them, is the gift of words, of loving speech. But it's not, it's fault finding all the time. And I think that's if that's just going to affect the quality of people who go into the field.
Is that just the consequence of like, keyboard warrior culture where people are just behind a screen? And what do you think why do you think it's happening?
I think some of it's that. In fact, to be really interesting, I mean, you could never get away with it to say, if you want to reach me, send me a letter or in person, but that wouldn't work. I think a lot of it has to do with the consumer culture, right? Which is, we treat institutions as like, I buy things, I'm paying tuition. When someone says to me, I don't have to say thank you, I pay these employees. I'm like, what? Right? It's like, remind me never to work for you.
Oh, wow.
So I think that there's a harshness, and some of it, you're right, is the screen that prevents the panim el panim, that critical exposure to the face. And I think some of it is that we use the same. I mean, first of all, you shouldn't use that language in things that you consume when you're talking to people. But yeah, it's bad. It's bad. We could do
Yeah.
better. I know we
Yeah,
could
we
do
could
better.
do better. Yeah, you mentioned that. I think the disposable, culture that we have where I can order something on Amazon, it'll arrive the same day, and we just have nothing has value anymore. It's just we lose patience. We don't have, the same appreciation for things. So it's a problem.
And by the way, we're not sending our kids into these positions. I'm very proud to say that I have a son who's the head of school. I'm very proud to say that. When he said, I want to be a teacher, it was like such a validation. It was like, this is like my one of my happiest days, right? It was like, and all of my four children picked beautiful professions. And I think the message we gave them was not, you need to pick professions where you make a lot of money. We gave them, you need to pick professions where you make a contribution to society. And I tell my students that all the time. This is not about replacing your parents financially. When you're thinking about a career, what kind of contribution in any field, what's the contribution to society? How are you changing things? How are you bringing goodness into the world? And the sad thing is that you see often those students, 10 or 15 years later, and they sort of fast track themselves in a business capacity to do something. They really didn't think about the meaning equation early enough, and they're really burnt out and unhappy. And that's not healthy. That's not healthy.
So I want to refine what I said before because I mentioned people aren't reading. Obviously, there are plenty of people who are reading the Torah very carefully. What I mean is
Right.
that by not understanding the big picture, like
They're
we
not
were
reading it expansively. How about that?
extensively. There you go. There you go. That's why you're you and I'm
When
me.
you need a word, go to
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Brown. She'll get it for
Exactly.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's like she always knows the word.
Yeah.
You're good. You're too
Right.
good at
So
me.
yeah, so really, we were talking about this off camera, but like, there's a level of I call it, let's say, pots and pans Judaism. The people are
Mhm.
focused on like the minutia a little bit too much sometimes, where not to say that's not important, but there's a much bigger picture that you lose out on when you do that.
Right.
And there's also just like the level of like when we were talking about, going to the YU book sale and you go
Mhm.
to, you see what the kind of stuff people are interested in. And honestly, it ties into, in my opinion, what we were also discussing, which is, the type of leadership we see today. We don't really like after October 7th, everything we see is kind of like from the rabbis, either Gog Magog or, fire and brimstone, end of days kind of chatter, or it's going to be like segulot and like kind of magical weird stuff. So I I
I don't
kind
know who you're talking to, Benji. I don't know. We have
of
Greg,
talking
I
to too
think.
many people, honestly. Yeah.
I think, look, this is not new. I worked in my dissertation. I worked in the 16th century, and it was very common in the century after the expulsion from the Iberian Peninsula with this, havoc of the diaspora was to sort of predict the end of days when you wrote a sefer, either in the introduction or the conclusion. And I think when you go through really desperate times, you think, how am I going to get on the other side of this? Like what could I do? I I I mentioned to you that I've been working on this book, Morning Has Broken Faith After October 7th, and looking at text through the lens of October 7th and thinking, it's like, I have students, I have adult students who are just saying, this is the end of my world. I never thought this would happen. I mean, we're blessed now to have some release of hostages, and I don't know about you, I could watch one of those videos all day long. I just press, like rewind of families reuniting, and I just constantly cry. And I think to myself, how do we get here? How do we get here in the world? And I think there are moments where it's so dark. It's so dark. And I get that people say, let me just find a simple solution. There's going to be a red bracelet somewhere, right? It's just because whatever complex political situation we're in this very dire, very dark place in parts of the world, and for our people. And yeah, there's an engine of goodness that all of us need. And I don't know about you. I wish that things were more simple, right?
Totally. I think really for me, I get why that, where that comes from and I understand, but like in terms of leadership, like the voice of Rabbi Sachs, for example, today is it would have been very, very necessary for it's like perfect
So
timing for Rabbi
necessary.
Sachs to chime in. So necessary. And like I was recently listening to an interview he did with Barry Weiss a few years ago on anti-Semitism and like how it mutates
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's
the rise
mutating virus. Yeah.
yeah, the rise of populism, and I'm like, this is like prophecy. People are not
Yeah.
going to appreciate this for the next 100 years, unfortunately. But he like a voice like Rabbi Sachs. Where we were saying this before, like they're all the people we're looking up to, we're looking for is like comedians. We had Ami Kozak on recently, who's like very outspoken about Israel. There's all these Instagram influencers and mothers that those are the
Right.
kind of leaders that are stepping up, but we're not really
Well, even the
seeing.
word influencer, right? Even the word
Yeah,
influencer, where someone said something to me, Dr. Brown, maybe one day you'll be an influencer. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know like what even they mean by that.
right.
But because I think, when I think of Reb Soloveitchik, I think you want to talk about influence? Someone who gave smicha to over 2,000, 2,000 young rabbis, someone who created like this very sophisticated. I think that's what you were talking about before, Benji, about where's the sophisticated Torah?
Right.
Where is sophisticated Torah? And the problem is also people don't read to the same extent, right? They're getting they're consuming content in very small bits. And
Yeah.
as a writer, it's very discouraging. You think to yourself, is this the end of the book? I don't think it's the end of the book. I don't. But I do think it's hard when people say, Erica, don't write such long books, like just short books, right? Short books, pamphlets. I'm going to start with pamphlets now.
Yeah. It's funny that before we get to the next question, it just reminded me of something like even I have like family members who are like,
Yeah.
can you dumb your podcast down? And
Yeah.
like, I don't even think it's so like sophisticated, but like it's not. But the thing is like, first of all, they want shorter, they want just like little. I'm like, listen, you want to get those inspirational podcasts. This isn't going to be
Oh.
it. Like I
Well,
understand when
Attention span is low.
all about attention span. It's also
that-
like, like we're supposed to, like when you raise a child you're supposed to raise a child to hang the rimonim on the Torah. You're not supposed to lower the Torah for the child. So,
Oh,
you
I
know,
love that. That's
yeah,
a great.
I heard Rabbi Dweck mention that it was beautiful. And really that's kind of like it's discouraging, but hopefully things will turn around.
Well, the beautiful thing is, Benji, that there is room for everybody in this tent. And so if your Torah is really, you know, i- is reading certain psukim while you're doing a challah bake and you're sharing what that challah looks like on Instagram, and you're in a Beit Midrash and you're learning a Tosfot, we have a place for all of you. In Judaism, for a long time, it was only about scholarship. I run some programs for women authors, and someone said to me, like, when are you going to do that for men? And I go, You've had the program for 2000 years, right? Like now it's time to share. And we actually can do that because there are so many spaces that people can have an experience of Judaism. I always think about like a ladder, right? Like Yaakov's ladder. So you come in at this place and maybe you'll go up two rungs and like and your experience, but so many more people feel engaged in Judaism. It's such a beautiful thing. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. You could say dumbing down, or you could say we've actually expanded the ladder and people can come in who maybe Gemara wasn't their thing, but something else is their thing. And they found company and they found wisdom and they found a life that's generative and spiritual. And I think that's important.
I think one of the most encouraging things is the fact that technology like will allow the next generations, our grandchildren, to like watch Rabbi Sacks, for example, or any like you can't do that with Rabbi Akiva. You can't do that with
That's
Hillel.
very
That's
true.
There's you can consume now
true.
Torah in a different way. So I think
But
it's
you can access Rabbi Akiva in a different way too,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's and also look, we're talking, we mentioned Norman Lamb and Rabbi Sachs and Rabbi Soloveitchik or Rabbi Akiva. We're in the business. I'm in the business of growing the next generation of the, like that to me. Books are one thing and they're really important just for my own creative energy. But our job is to say, how do we grow the next, everyone is unique, but how are we going to grow the next great, the next people with the prophetic voice?
Yeah,
That's the job.
yeah.
That's
We
the
we
job.
could. We,
And if you say, if you have children, you say, how do I cultivate the prophetic voice in a child?
well said.
It's a
Beautiful.
that's a great point.
Great point.
I have a 4-year-old, and then
I have, what's your 4-year-old's name?
Emmanuel,
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel is a beautiful name. Lots of expectations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Reach high, reach high, reach
it's
high.
pressure. It's pressure because I want him to access Judaism in an expansive way, as you stated, and you don't know exactly how to navigate that because there's so many, you know.
That's true, but we have beautiful stories and helping them say, well, what would you do if you're in that position? Or you take a moral dilemma and you say, how would you think about this? Well, how would you think about it? Here's how I think about it. It was part of it is the critical thinking piece. And that's once you can develop critical thinking, you can help shape lots of different arenas.
Thank you.
That was great. So, in your chapter on Parshat Ki Tisa, you delve into the repeated phrase "Am Kashe Oref," a stiff-necked people, and explore the very real problem of stubbornness that inhabits us all. What insights can we take from this analysis regarding leadership and its challenges?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot because since we last spoke, actually in December, I had neck surgery. So it was very hard to move my neck. And I felt like, oh, now I am part of the Amkshay Oref because they went in the neck, right? So I have a scar on my neck. And so I've been thinking about neck motility and mobility and as a metaphor, right? First of all, just the physical pain of it, but then also like what's the metaphor of being able to turn the neck? And actually, it's so amazing when you can turn your neck, right? It's like I didn't appreciate it, but when your neck is like when you're stuck and you feel pain in the stretch, and you say to yourself, if what if I could not move my neck? My view of the world would be so narrow. Um, and I wouldn't be able to say, oh, here's someone to the right of me, here's someone to the left of me, right? Or maybe here's someone behind me. And I don't mean to reduce it to such a simplistic, choreography, but I think there's something about moral rigidity and spiritual rigidity that has to do with this lack of mobility. I won't see. I'll give you an example, and it's such a small, small thing, and it says to me so much. I feel that a lot of leaders that I know who are really exceptional, they're always turning their necks. So I'll give you an example. I walk in the office and someone is at the front door. They're a few feet ahead of me. They don't even look to see if there's someone behind them. So they just go through the door. They don't open the door. And then you'll see like a Menchie student. And they look and they see that you're waiting and they open the door. Like they don't ignore you. They don't make you invisible. And when you think about community building, you have to get granular. And the Maharal talks about this, this circle, the power of the Mahol, the power of the circle. The circle is very powerful because when you dance in a circle, the shape stays the same, and you can see everybody, even as it expands. But when you go to a wedding, a Jewish wedding, and everyone is dancing like crazy, and there's certain people, they're on the edge, and they're always bringing other people into the circle, right? Oh, you should come in. Oh, the ants is there. You should come in. And there's some people they're dancing and schwitzing in the center, and they don't care what anyone else is doing. That I get my foot stepped on 100 times, right? It's not comfortable with the high-heeled shoe. Let me just say. Um, and then you think to yourself, this is really a metaphor for community building and for leadership is can you look from place to place and not just ahead of you? Because the people who can do that, they bring other people in. They understand what belonging means. And it's as small as when I walk into shul, do I walk in and look at the person to the left and the right and the front and behind me? And I'm just cognizant that I'm praying in a space with other people who may have other needs. And there's some people, I call it the Orthodox stare. They walk in, they look at you. If they don't know you, they immediately turn. They don't smile. They just immediately turn around. And once you start seeing this, you cannot unsee this. I'm sorry, I just ruined things for you, but you can't unsee this. And then you start to say, what would happen if every time you looked at someone you didn't know, your automatic response was to smile? And that's a small thing, but it's also an act of leadership. Is if I can generate some sense of belonging between me and you. I've said this before on a podcast that there's a deli called Zingerman's, and they do customer service. They're a deli in Ann Arbor. I've never been to Ann Arbor. I don't eat tray food, but they have this customer service thing that someone put me onto. It was a little book. They have a rule. They have a rule, and their rule is that if you're employed there and you see someone with a customer within 10 feet, you have to look up, and within 4 feet, you have to smile. Like they're giving shiurim, right? Shiurim for here is when someone is in your orbit. And I actually that scares me about orthodoxy right now is the lack of friendliness. It's the lack even to our own. It's really painful. And if you're going to change something culturally, you want to be a real influencer, influence people like that.
And the inability to adapt to the others around you, um, in a simple way of, even like you said, with the greetings and just the noticing the other person, it's also a segue into also being able to notice and accept other people's ideas.
Yeah, correct. It's the metaphor for other things. I got called out. I'm just going to be honest with you. I confess, I got called out. So I saw someone at a kiddush. I'm not a big kiddush person. I saw someone and I wanted to talk to her and she was talking to someone else. But I walked in and I said, "Oh, I'm meaning to talk to you." And she wrote to me and she said, "I was standing next to her and you paid me no attention." I can't even tell you the shame that I felt. I immediately wrote to her and I apologized and I went out of my way and I just said, gosh, like this is happening everywhere, right? We just don't pay attention. And then if I can't take you in, how do I take in your ideas? How do I say, oh, like I only have to listen to the news that affirms my view of the world. I didn't grow up that way. I don't imagine you grew up that way, right? News outlets, it's like this constant affirming of your beliefs as opposed to, the challenging of belief, which is what makes us smarter and more thoughtful.
One of the things I'm very proud of, are the shul that we go to, that Benti and I go to. Like the rabbis and the families are so cognizant of the staff that works there that
So nice.
that
Wait,
it's
what
like
shul is it? Because we got to give a shout out. We got to give a shout.
Shari Rachamim and Great Neck. Just it's like really, it's just really beautiful, like to see, like, first of all, the guy who, like, runs the staff, he treated like family. His daughter runs around the shul,
Right.
and he feels like everyone, he's really, but it's not fake. It's like everybody
Right.
really treats him well, and he treats everyone else well, and he like loves his job. And I'm like, this is actually one of the proudest moment, like, feelings that I have from our community, that like that they actually are paying attention to this stuff, and they're not, they're not just ignoring it.
Are
Like,
you're Sephardic, right?
Yeah.
yes, it's a Persian shul.
There you go.
Well, it's not always the case. I don't know if it's always the case.
I grew up in Deal, and I could say I'm not Sephardic, I'm not Syrian, but I can say that the respect for rabbis is just exponentially different, in my humble estimation. Modi as a whole, like lots of skits about this, but
Yeah. Well, not
Sephardic
just that, even elders, like elders in the
elders, right?
community
In
and
my when I grew up in Deal, if an elder walked in, you always greeted that person, you stood up in front of that person. It's a very different mentality.
there's
Um,
there's one elder in our community who Mr. Basalian actually he's just like he's not a rabbi, but everyone calls him rabbi and everyone stands up for him and the rabbis stand up for him. He's just
yeah,
like because he's just a wise person who knows about our history and has just been through so
yeah,
much and like you know I love seeing that and I love seeing but one of the things I think you mentioned is this like this lack of paying and I'm not saying we do it across the board. If visitors
right,
sometimes come in, I've heard people say, hey, like nobody get paid attention to us.
right.
But overall, I just think that like the midot factor is
Yeah.
something that I don't know what it is, like
Well,
more
if we ask our children, when you're with other people, do they feel heard and do they feel seen? Right? Do they feel heard? If we said, you come home from shul, and the first question was not what did so and so wear, not who is so and so with, was did you feel heard and did you feel seen? Did you hear and did you see others? I think that's a deep engagement, especially in times of technology. It's a deep engagement. I'm regularly aware of people. I'm speaking to them and they're typing or they're shopping or whatever. And it's like part of me is like, should I just say, I know that you're typing. So I'm gonna hang up and when you're ready, I'll call you back. Should I do it? What do you think, Fancy? Should I do it?
it's a good idea.
Good.
All
All
right.
right.
I'm have to go soon, gentlemen. It's great talking to you. Any last questions?
Yes.
Can I ask you, okay, so you know what? If we have one more question, I'm going to go with Parsha Toledot, if that's okay. Toldot, is
Okay,
that all
fantastic.
right? So
Great Parsha.
yeah, there's a lot of psychology there and a lot going on there. So the chapter on Parshat Toldot titled "The Lies in Leadership"
Mm.
explores the psychological role of lies and their treatment in the story of Rivkah and Yaakov. How do lies intersect with leadership, and what can we learn from this narrative?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's such a profound question because you know, midavar sheker tirchak, on the one hand we say, stay far away from deception. And on the other hand, sometimes you can't be entirely honest about something that's going on in leadership. And I'll give you a great example. Um, you have to fire someone, right? And you don't want your kila to know what's exactly going on because it's not their business. There are legal issues. There's also kavod issues, right? You want to treat someone with dignity, so there. And I'm not going into the halachic components of whether you can tell a white lie or not. I think it's very important not to lie ever, not to lie to your children, not to, that they see you as a person of honesty. And yet there are larger, I don't know how to say, conceits by which people have to lead. I call it that the tolerable ones are what I'll call benign manipulation, right? And that's a huge parenting thing for me, right? It's benign manipulation, right? You have to manipulate a situation, but you're doing it with every benign motive, right? So for example, if I say, listen, Benzi, you have to go to sleep now, right? Do you want to go to sleep now or do you want to go 5 minutes from now, right? So that's benign manipulation. It was, I need you to do X. So I'm going to give you the feeling that you have autonomy. You don't really have autonomy. You want to take a bath now? You want to take a bath, right? And I think sometimes in larger leadership issues, searches for talent, replacements, um, when things fall apart. I always say, I love doing searches because they're super, super interesting on the leadership front. Because you have all these different stakeholders who all think they know exactly what you need, and there's a lot of anxiety. Well, because the institution is going to reflect the leader, and we're like this, or we're like that. And I always say you have to do two things. You have to when you're doing a search, you have to identify talent, candidates, and you have to hold the center of the institution. Finding candidates is actually easier than making sure that you like hold the institution. And sometimes in order to do that, you have to, it's not lying, but you can't tell everybody everything. You can't. You just can't. People want to know, they want transparency, they want gossip. You can't. It's not okay. And there are times where I've run something and I had to say, I have to take executive privilege. I can't share with you a piece of information because it would gravely harm someone. So you just have to trust me that this is not a candidate we can move forward with, right? And that's, I'm not lying, but I'm withholding. So I think there's all these, sort of edges, right? So, benign manipulation, withholding, that we do to protect someone's dignity in a leadership situation. And by the way, this is particularly, we mentioned about being older. What happens when you have someone, rabbi in a community who's getting older and he's no longer leading, but you have to protect his dignity and you can't, how do you do that thoughtfully? It's hard. It's hard. But if you assume goodwill and you use goodwill, I think people trust your judgment. I hope. I hope. Yeah. And
Very
the and those stories are filled with deception and also the payback. If you're the deceiver, you get deceived. It becomes the currency with which you work, and we paid a really big price in Safer Braciate for outright dishonesty.
Very important points, and I love how you connected that to something that we don't even think about.
Mhm.
That's really amazing. So we wanted to thank you. I know we went a little over time, and
Sorry about
I'm,
that.
I'm always happy to go overtime with the two of you. It's a lot of fun.
thank you so much. And we hope that our listeners can where can they find you and get your book?
All the books are available on Amazon or Koren. Koren is my wonderful publisher. And I have a website, ericabrown.com, Erica with a C. And I mean, I don't sell the books, but they're up there. And thank you for making books important. I really want to thank both of you for making books and ideas important. And like committing to raising the intellectual and spiritual level of our people. It's really a beautiful thing.
Thank you
And
so
thank you
much.
for making leadership back on the map in the Jewish world. This is not the first book that you've written on leadership. You've had multiple books on leadership, and it's extremely important. Keep doing what you're doing, and we hope to speak to you soon.
Okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
friends. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.